Hello, this is Overlord Bo, back with an information video, and today we'll be going over the Doubloon ships overview for 2024 in World of Warships. And we'll have SAT score helping us out today, because this list is going to be a very long list. So pack your bags and get ready for this adventure as we go through every Doubloon ship in World of Warships that is still attainable in the armory. So, to start off, we're going to go from Tier 9 all the way down to the lowest tiers that you can, which is Tier 2. So, to start us off, let's talk about the VELOS. So, tell us about the VELOS there, SAT.
VELOS, think of her as a gunboat Fletcher. Higher DPM than Fletcher. You only get one rack, but you reload that rack a little bit faster. You also get DFAA, you get US Smoke. So she plays pretty much like a gunboat Fletcher. I would say it's fine if you like the Fletcher, but if you don't like Fletchers for some reason, then you can just go skip the ship.
Yep. Moving on, let's talk about the Sun YAT-SEN. Sun YAT-SEN is a Soyuz hull with the guns that are very similar to the Georgias. They're pretty similar to the dispersion of the Georgias, but they have less damage than the Georgia. So you'll see, if you're used to playing the Georgia or wanting a Georgia, the Sun Yat-SEN guns are going to be similar to that, but they do significantly less damage, and it's not going to be as fast as a Georgia as well. But what is your take on it?
She is much more durable than Georgia, though. She gets the Soyuz hull armor, which is pretty good, even if she doesn't get as much HP. So if you like the traditional battleship role and you don't have a Georgia, then Sun Yat-SEN is a fine ship. Otherwise, if you're not into those kind of slower, tankier kind of battleships, then go look somewhere else.
Yep, so about the IWAMI, a lot of these ships you're going to be seeing are going to be coal ships as well, and we have a separate video that will be covering the IWAMI. But long story short, for the IWAMI, we don't really recommend you buy it. I wouldn't recommend it for buying. You can just get it for coal if you do want to get it, but even then, it's not even a top coal ship for coal. So I wouldn't really recommend you buying the IWAMI at all. But if you want more information, let me just check it out in the coal ship video. Moving on, let's talk about the DALIAN. I consider the DALIAN to be pretty much a tier 9 like mini Smolensk in how the playstyle is. It has a very good smoke, nice concealment. It has torpedoes as well. But what is your take on it?
Yeah, she gets the Pan-Asian smoke, which is it has a pretty good set time. Doesn't last as long as a traditional smoke, but the decreased cooldown means you can relatively spam it, and the torpedo range is pretty good. So if you're kiting away at closer range, you can both use your guns and use your torps if they try to rush you in smoke. The problem with DALIAN is that she gets pitted against 10, 12 kilometer radars all the time. And she's not very armored nor maneuverable. So make one or two mistakes and boom, you're dead. So if you like high DPM ships and don't mind the cost that comes with them, then DALIAN is worth considering. If you like a more traditional cruiser that doesn't explode if you make one small mistake, get something else.
Yep, moving on, let's talk about the VERDI. Now, the VERDI was one of the first SAP secondary ships to be introduced, along with the Italian exhaust smokescreen as well. So a lot of people will like to play the VERDI as a secondary brawler battleship, using the smoke to kind of move in, use the secondaries, and then turn out and cut out and pretty much not get death struck while turning out. So a lot of people like the VERDI as more of a brawler for the tier 9s, but would you recommend people buy this ship, SAT?
I mean, if you're into the secondary brawling memes, then yeah, the Giuseppe is actually a pretty respectable ship. But she's not overall a strong ship. She's just more for like secondary memes. And even then, that's kind of eclipsed by the Sicilia at tier 10, if you get a Research Bureau ship. So if you want to buy a ship for secondary memes, I mean, she's alright, but if you want like a powerful ship, go look somewhere else.
Yep. Moving on, let's talk about the Tulsa. Tulsa is a coal ship, right?
Yes, she's also a coal ship.
Okay, so you guys can cover that in the coal ship video. I wouldn't recommend you buying the Tulsa. There's a better other tier 9 cruisers you can buy, like the DALIAN, but overall, I wouldn't really recommend buying the Tulsa. You can just get it for coal if you want. But moving on from the Tulsa, let's talk about the KEARSARGE. KEARSARGE is definitely one of the top tier 9 battleships in the game that you can still buy. Even though it is a coal ship, I would still recommend you can buy it. If you're in a rush to buy it, you can buy it. It's probably one of the only coal ships I'd recommend you buy, just because of just how good the KEARSARGE is, but I'll let SAT cover it a little bit.
It's been covered in the coal video, but she's essentially a hybrid battleship. She can launch planes to complement her 12-gun broadside, but she's also a very hard ship to play. If you don't have experience playing hybrid battleships, then I would not get the KEARSARGE first. I would recommend an easier ship until you get some experience playing something like Nebraska or Louisiana. But once you do and you get some games in her, KEARSARGE can be a very powerful battleship.
Yep, so the CARNOT is also a coal ship, so we're not really going to talk about that one, but I wouldn't really recommend you buying this ship. It's very slow DPM, and the fact you have to stay at long range can make this ship a very tough ship to play. So very high skill floor, so not really recommend for spending your hard-earned money on this ship. So if you want to get this ship, just do it with coal, but not with money. The Groningen you can also get for coal. I would definitely suggest this particular DD. It's a great farming ship. It also can make a lot of credits, even though you can get it for coal. If you do want to buy a farmer destroyer, the Groningen is a great option for you. Great smokescreen, great hydro, good anti-air as well. And it can also be a fun destroyer hunter as well. And you can make a lot of credits with this ship. So would definitely recommend the Groningen for buying. If you don't want to buy, you can get it for coal. I would definitely recommend it for coal as well. It's probably one of my top favorite ships in the game. Moving on, we'll talk about the Marco Polo, unless the teacher says something, even though it is a coal ship.
Marco Polo is essentially a standard battleship that fires SAP rounds instead of HE. And it's actually kind of accurate for a SAP battleship, which is unusual for Italians. She just doesn't get the smoke generator. So, I mean, she's not a bad ship. She got buffed some time ago, so she's overall just decent, even if her reload's on the slow side. If you like battleships, and if you want a Italian battleship you can actually hit shells with, then Marco Polo is actually not a bad choice. She just gets overshadowed by the Loria, but Loria's for steel. So if you can't get the Loria, then you can get the Marco Polo.
Yep, exactly. Now moving on, let's talk about the Z44. Do not buy this ship. Yeah. Don't buy the Z44.
I would only suggest if you like torpedo destroyers for some reason. And she has, in her defense, she actually did get buffed over the years. So she's not an awful ship. She's just not a recommended ship at all. So, as I said, only get if you're into torpedo destroyers and you don't want to buy a Japanese torpedo ship for whatever reason.
Yep. Moving on, let's talk about the POMMERN. You can currently get the POMMERN for coal as well. It is a fun battleship to play, but I wouldn't really say buy it, because you can just buy the KEARSARGE instead. Like, the POMMERN is a great brawling ship. A lot of fun with its hydro, torpedoes, great secondaries. But if you're just trying to buy a battleship, like a tier 9, normally I would say suggesting the KEARSARGE. It's a lot more... This is a better ship overall. But if you want more of a brawler battleship, then I can see you buying the POMMERN. But you can either buy it or just get it for coal. But I would definitely recommend the POMMERN down the line for a beginner or middle player. Moving.
Yeah,
Sorry.
if it's your first coal ship, I would say Pommern's a fine choice. She's German. She'll train your German captains. She's easy to use. You'll probably YOLO in her and die a couple times, but that's part of the learning experience anyways. And either way, she will make you some credits. So yeah, pretty forgiving ship, but people will pick on you because they know a lot of newer players will play her.
Yep, exactly. What about the AGIR?
AGIR is AGIR should also be available for coal. She's a kind of a not a battle cruiser. She's a large cruiser, and a fairly durable one at that. Her armor's pretty good. Her guns can be a bit trolly at times, but overall, like, she's a pretty respectable brawler, at least by cruiser standards. And the guns, while they can be unreliable at times, they hit hard once they hit the citadel.
Yep.
And of course, you can always rush the enemy and torp them. So if you want a solid, reliable cruiser at tier 9, then AGIR is a good option.
Moving on, let's talk about the AZUMA. Would you recommend people buy the AZUMA or get it for coal?
AZUMA, I would recommend you buy the AL version because it comes with a much better camo. But realistically speaking, I would say get her for coal, because she's a relatively easy play style, and she's she's a good farmer, but she doesn't have that much battle impact. So if you want something easy to play and you just want to mindlessly farm at 15 to 20 kilometers, then AZUMA's actually a pretty good ship. Not to the point where I would spend doubloons for it, at least not without a discount. But she can be a pretty good mindless farmer, but if you don't mind the boring playstyle, of course.
Yep, moving on from the tier 9s, we're going to the tier 8s, and the first tier 8 is going to be the legendary GRAF Zeppelin, which I'll let SAT score cover.
Well, unfortunately, today's GRAF Zeppelin is a far cry from when she was introduced. She will still do well in operations where your secondaries can farm ships, and certain game modes where you get close, but as for a randoms or even ranked ship, she is far outclassed. Her glory days are over, so unless you want to meme around in her, just go get a different carrier.
Yep, next ship is going to be the ROMA.
Roma is surprisingly a defensive battleship. Her guns are pretty nice when they hit, and that's the problem. She either hits or they don't. And when they hit, they will either overpen or cause random citadels. But that being said, she's a pretty nice battleship to handle, and her reload is on the good side. So if the guns behave for you, she's a pretty solid battleship. But of course, it can go from solid to just being frustrating in an instant, depending on how RNG favors you.
Yep, for sure. Moving on, let's talk about the Vanguard. Would you recommend people buying the Vanguard for 13,300 doubloons?
Unlike the Roma, Vanguard doesn't have as much things going for her. Armor is not very good, her fire angles aren't very good, her claim to fame is just literally just being the last British battleship to ever be commissioned.
Yep.
But that doesn't matter for much, because all she's really got going for her is AA. If you want a battleship, just pick something else.
Yeah, moving on, let's talk about the key. Do you think the key is the key to victory or to defeat?
Key is very similar to Amagi. Just trade a little bit of, I believe, reload and for 10-kilometer torpedoes and better AA, and a slightly worse armor scheme. But otherwise, she plays almost exactly the same as Amaki. If you like the tech tree ship, you'll love the key.
And yeah, the ANHALT? Yeah, no. I do not recommend this ship at all.
She has There's so many better German battleship options, even at tier 8. ANHALT, I'm not sure what I'm not sure what they intended with her, because her secondaries suck. Her guns are funny, but they have terrible shell velocity, she has Mimi torpedoes. So, I mean, she does fine if she gets into close range. Just good luck ever getting close.
Yep, very unfortunately. Moving on, the next ship is going to be the Bradenburg.
Brandenburg. Ooh, go on.
No, you can go. Sorry.
Brandenburg, 12 305 millimeter guns. I mean, it's very similar to the Bismarck and Tirpitz, just with a lower caliber guns. It makes it more of a battle cruiser in which you can arm broadside ship with AP, but not get as many citadels, or you can switch to HE and just start fires. So it's better against broadside cruisers, and well, against angled battleships, you have HE for that. So you'll have to be a bit more mindful about shell choices, but it's a pretty decent battleship, everything considering.
Yep, moving on. The next ship is going to be the Borodino. The Borodino's fame is the fact that even though it doesn't have the best battle armor, it does have amazing 6 guns. The 6 guns are extremely accurate. And it does have a 12-kilometer radar, so it is the only battleship to have a 12-kilometer radar. So a lot of people like it for the 12-kilometer radar and the extremely accurate guns. A lot of the Russian gameplay, or a lot of the battleship gameplay, is just sitting about and at a distance. So a lot of comfortable Russian battleship enjoyers will also enjoy the Borodino. So I'll definitely recommend it if you enjoy just sitting at distance, sitting back, sniping, or middle distance. The Borodino can do a really good job in that role.
Just be careful of her 25 millimeter bow. People will just punch through your big bow, and you will be very unhappy.
Yep, for sure, for sure. Moving on, let's talk about the Constellation. What do you think about the Constellation, SAT?
Imagine you made the Colorado go 30 knots somehow, and gave it radar, and gave it DFAA, and gave it slightly more accurate guns for good measure. And what you get is a somewhat underrated ship, to be honest. She has everything to be successful, but she's usually overshadowed by more popular ships like the Massachusetts. But that doesn't mean she's a bad ship in her own right. Think of her as a battle cruiser that has the tools to fight everything, but does have to be careful due to her lower armor. So she's on the softer side, but the utility she gets in return can make up for it if the player is capable of using it.
Yep. It does also have torpedoes, which is also a nice thing of it as well, and is also a very fast ship as well. So very nice of that as well for this ship. Moving on, let's talk about the Flandre. What about the Flandre would you say is good or not to be able to buy this ship? Would you say it's worth it, or do you think it's not really worth it?
And most of the time, no. Flandre tries to be Alsace Hull, and you get Alsace Hull with 9 guns instead of 12. You do get, I believe they're 16-inch guns. You get more HP than most other Tier 8 battleships, but you also get 1 less heal. You get secondaries, and in theory they're supposed to be good, but all that's good is their fire starting capabilities. So Flandre tries to do a couple different things, but doesn't really do a good job of anything. So not a ship I would recommend, except for in operations, because in operations her secondary actually becomes really good. So she can farm ships pretty easily. But that's a very niche reason to get her, and overall, I just would not recommend her at all.
Yep, moving on, let's talk about the TIRPITZ. One of the oldest premiums in the game, still to this day, a tried and true battleship for the German Navy. Is pretty much the sister ship, is the sister ship of the Bismarck. So instead of having Hydro, this ship has torpedoes instead. I would still recommend this ship to this day. Amazing ship for sure. A lot of fun to play. A very fun money-making ship in operations, as well as having strong secondaries, good okayish guns, strong survivability. Its only real weakness is what took it out IRL, which was bombers.
Yep. TIRPITZ remain to this day a great premium, with partially because of her playstyle, and also partially because of the history behind her. So it doesn't matter if you get her for gameplay or for history, she's going to be a solid addition to your fleet. That being said, people do like targeting TIRPITZ because they know that a lot of newer players will play her, and know she's an easy target because of that.
Yep, that is for sure. Moving on, let's talk about the Gascogne. Would you recommend the Gascogne? Would you recommend this ship? Gascogne?
Gascogne is think of the Richelieu, but instead of having the super firing turrets, you just put the quad turrets in a conventional battleship layout. Does it make it any good? Not really.
So let's put it this way. Would you recommend the Flandre or the Gascogne? Say someone wants a French premium battleship. Would you recommend the Flandre or would you recommend the Gascogne? If they had to pick one, for me personally, I would recommend the Flandre. Like, the Flandre's guns are a lot more, like, the gun placements are a lot better than the Gascogne. Like, the Gascogne has a turret in the front and turret in the back, which means you have to show a lot of side to get all those guns off. While the Flandre, you got the better gun placements of having 6 guns in the front, 3 in the rear, and you also have a lot better secondaries on the Flandre. So overall, like, if you're going to pick between the Flandre or the Gascogne, I would personally recommend the Flandre out of the two.
I choose neither.
Well, there you go. All right.
Save your money.
Save your money. All right, moving on. Let's talk about the Alabama. All right, so Alabama, so let me like to think about it this way. So thinking of the North Carolina is the middle child of the 3 sister ships. The 3 sister ships are the Alabama, Massachusetts, and North Carolina. The North Carolina is the sniper, Alabama is the middle child, and the Massachusetts is the brawler of the 3. So if you like a more middle child of the Americans, or you like it more in the middle range, like a little bit brawl, a little bit long range, then the Alabama will be a great battleship for you. Good survivability, good anti-air, good maneuverability for it being a tier 8 American battleship. Great money making potential in operations. But yeah, what do you think of that? You think that was a pretty accurate assessment?
I wouldn't classify North Carolina as a sniper. I would actually say Alabama and North Carolina are very similar functionally. So they both carry the same guns. They're both slow shells, which forces them to get into mid-range to hit anything. But otherwise, like, there's some notable differences. Like, North Carolina gets a improved heal. The Alabama gets a improved torpedo defensive system. But functionally, they're very similar. If you like the North Carolina gameplay, you'll like the Alabama gameplay, and vice versa. Or your grandfather could have served on Alabama, and you just want her for her history. Yep, either way, you'll be satisfied with your purchase.
All right, next is going to be the Aquila. Would you recommend people the Aquila CV?
Aquila, you play her if you like funny AP rockets, depth striking broadside cruisers.
Didn't they nerf the rockets on this thing?
They did. Oh. But that was a long time ago.
Oh, rip. All right, moving on. Let's talk about the Hornet. Would you recommend the Hornet?
If you want to go Doolittle all over a poor destroyer, then yeah, Hornet is fine. She also has respectable torpedo bombers when your B-25s are on cooldown.
That is very true, but talking about like the Aquila and a Hornet, would you say those are like meta tier 8 CVs at this point, or do you think they're lower on the bracket for tier 8 CVs?
I would put Aquila pretty low. The Hornet is okay, but just not better compared to the other options.
Okay.
She does have history going for her and the funny meme B-25s.
Okay.
So at least she has some fun reason to play her.
Yep, so the next CV we'll be talking about is going to be the CHKALOV. How would you place the CHKALOV on this totem pole of the premium CVs?
CHKALOV is similar to the tech tree equivalent Pobeda, except she has she carries the standard dive bombers instead of, I believe, rockets.
She has torpedoes, bombers, and skip bombers, so she has no attack fighters.
Yep. I mean, she was a solid CV when she came out. Nothing really changed about her. It's just that no one really wants to play her. Overall, she is a little bit on the harder side to use, but nothing overly wrong about her.
The main thing about the Russian CVs is the fact that they have single strike usage, where their full squadrons go out and hit a target and then they all go back. So a lot of times you can use that to your advantage to not take damage or have to deal with fighters as much, due to how the fighter mechanic works. So a lot of people find the Russian CVs to be pretty annoying to deal with. And since all the Russian CVs... Yeah, that's for ranked. So good stuff. What about the Indomitable? How would you rank the Indomitable for tier 8 CVs?
I mean, she's kind of average, but the problem with her is more because she's one-dimensional. Her gameplay is literally send out level bombers, send out level bombers, send out level bombers, send out level bombers. That's literally it. It's one-dimensional. It is strong in that one dimension, but it gets boring super quickly. So if you want a carrier with some variety, play something else. If you just want to keep ships on fire all day, then Indomitable is actually your best option.
Yep. Moving on, let's talk about the Iran. So what do you think about that Iran for a tier 8 cruiser?
Tier 8 cruiser, basically it's a balanced version of the Kutuzov. It doesn't get smoke, but it gets the deep water torpedoes, same as the Yueyang. And it gets pretty good Russian light cruiser guns. You have to be careful because she's not very durable nor maneuverable. But she can output a respectable amount of damage if left alone.
Yep, for sure. So would you recommend people buy this ship, or would you say they would be better to buy a different tier 8 cruiser, perhaps?
Well, there is a better cruiser I can think of that we have not covered yet.
Okay, so we'll just go down the line later for that ship. What about the Wichita? There's going to be a lot of tier 8 cruisers. There's a lot of them.
Wichita is essentially the premium version of Baltimore, and playstyle-wise, they're nearly interchangeable. If you want a premium Baltimore, then go ahead and get the Wichita. If you don't like how the Baltimore played, or you just don't like the US cruiser style of gameplay, get something else.
All right, moving on. Let's talk about the Hampshire. Would you recommend the Hampshire? The Hampshire has AP-only shells, no HE, does not have a heal, has a Hydro, DFA, spotter, or a fighter. Definitely recommend a spotter for this one. But overall, I would say that AP-only gimmick with no heal makes it pretty rough to play for newer players. But if you're more of an experienced player, then you'll definitely be able to do a lot of damage with this ship. But what do you think of this ship overall, SAT? Would you recommend people buy this ship or not recommend?
It's more of a funny gimmick because no one really plays her in randoms. You're kind of going on the gimmick that you're relying on a gimmick that no one really knows. So AP is fun when you catch someone that's broadside, but if the rare person knows that and just angles in towards you, then you're gonna cry until you get into torpedo range. But of course, in a randoms battle, good luck with that. I would rather have a more versatile ship.
Moving on, let's talk about the San Diego. What do you want to tell me about the San Diego? Would you recommend this ship to newer or first-time buyers?
Number 1, SAP Dispenser. She is essentially a Tier 8 Premium Atlanta that got a heal and SAP rounds for whatever reason. So, not a beginner-friendly ship because Atlanta has negative armor, but she is a decent to solid ship in her own right if you can get on someone's broadside, because those SAP and AP rounds actually do hurt. She's just not an easy ship to play, because without that HE, her DPM is not very good against bow-wind targets. She could serve as like a training ship if you are looking to get the OS in the future, because her main battery reload does allow her to punish broadside or other vulnerable ships in that short amount of time.
Yep. All right. So what about the Rochester? There's a lot of American cruisers at Tier 8 doubloons. I didn't realize there's so many of them. Good lord.
That's what happens when the U.S. wins the war. So anyways, Rochester's claim to fame is being a smoke cruiser. Very rare for a U.S. ship. She gets U.S. smoke. She gets basically a Baltimore that trades the radar for the smoke. So she can sit in one spot and farm for quite a long time. But her lack of radar means she doesn't fare as well against destroyers. So it's kind of a playstyle change. Do you want to go farm bigger targets in safety with your smoke? Or do you want to guard caps and force destroyers off with your radar? And in this case, she's fairly unique. There is a few other ships with smoke, but Rochester is the only obtainable one for US cruisers at least.
Yep, moving on, let's talk about the Tier 8 Alaska Congress, which we're lucky if Congress is ever in session here, but with that joke out of the way, what about the Congress do you like and dislike, SAT?
She is probably the most durable one of the most durable Tier 8 cruisers there is. The problem is her firepower is literally Wish.com Alaska. You get 5 turrets, you get 5 guns in the front, but her firepower is a notable, significant downgrade from the Alaska. And because of that, she is sometimes a pain to play, as your guns cannot effectively punish other ships. You can sit there and last forever, though, if that's worth something.
All right, moving on, let's talk about the Tone, one of the first hybrid cruisers to be added into the game. So do you think the Tone is a good for a beginner or middle class player to get, or do you think they should pick another Tier 8 cruiser to get?
Easily pick something else to get unless you're very experienced players and want to play a hybrid ship, because Tone is a very, very difficult ship to play. She is a bit on the squishy side. Her guns are notably inferior to other Japanese ships, and the plane itself is surprisingly it's not very durable. So, like, beginners will not like the ship because even though she can stealth torpedo it, they're going to be tempted into flying the planes. And what better way to get death struck than to be away from your ship while you're flying the plane? And experienced players will hate the fact that she doesn't have much firepower. So, yeah, she's just not a very comfortable combination of firepower, durability, planes, and etc. The best thing about her is the concealment, but really, just why go through all that trouble to play her when there's many other ships?
Now let's talk about the legendarily overpowered Tiger 59. This ship's got radar, it's got smoke, it's got a super heal and DFAA with 2 minnow turrets. Would you think this ship is a great ship for people to get or a bust?
I mean, you dedicated a full video to showing the power of the Tiger 59. She was, I believe in that video, she was the best ramming ship Wargaming ever created. But in series, if we're talking about her seriously, she is unfortunately a meme for a good reason. Her damage output is not very good, but while her radar and smoke is very powerful, you're going to struggle to kill anything with those guns. So, in that sense, she's a pure utility ship. A very powerful one at that. but not a playstyle that a lot of people will like.
Yep. So moving on, let's talk about the Belfast 43. Belfast 43 is pretty much the bigger Belfast of the original Belfast that's in this game. So would you say this ship is as good as the original Belfast, or do you think it's not as good?
Unfortunately, another Wish.com version of the previous ship. The Tier 7 Belfast is still considered much better. Tier 8 Belfast, I mean, she gets a few new tools and tricks. She gets torpedoes, she still has the radar, she has a short duration smoke, but overall, it's just kind of feels like a downgrade because of that tier difference. I mean, if you like the Belfast, she still has the same history as the original. It's just that as a ship, she's just not as good. And, well, if you don't own the Belfast and want to have one, then ignorance is bliss.
Yep. So moving on, let's talk about the Bayard. What do you think of the Bayard? I personally think the Bayard is a very strong credit farming ship in operations, as well as a very strong ship in ranked and randoms as well. Its speed and maneuverability, plus the high DPM and the engine boost, allows this and the reload booster as well, makes it where you can punish broadside ships with the AP with that reload booster. Or if you set someone on fire, they DCP'd, you can then use that reload booster to set more permanent fires on them when their DCP is down. So overall, I think this ship is a very strong ship for both competitive and for just randoms and ranked. So to me, overall, it's a very, very strong ship.
Think of her as a mini Colbert. Heavily relies on dodging, but her firepower output is pretty dang good. So if you want to practice, if you want to get some practice into dodging and to play French cruisers or to master them, then Bayard will be one of your best credit farming options.
Yep, for sure. Moving on, let's talk about the Kaga. And how would you rank the Kaga compared to the other Tier 8 CVs?
Kaga is my recommended CV of choice, both for beginners and experienced players. And that's because Kaga, she has excellent torpedo bombers, very efficient at farming battleships no matter what the tier. And that is because she gets powerful torpedo bombers, and she also gets amazing plane reserves. She has a ton of torpedo bombers, a good amount of attack aircraft and dive bombers as well, but those are not nearly as powerful. The reserves, however, are still very useful, so even if you make mistakes in her, you'll still have a lot of planes left even in the mid-game. A very forgiving CV, and also quite powerful one at that. So if you want to learn how to CV, definitely a good option for your among Japanese ships.
All right, moving on, let's talk about the Oshkoshov. What do you personally think of the Oshkoshov? It's definitely not a very common cruiser. You don't see this thing very often, and why do you think that is?
Oshkoshov, it uses like a similar hull to Smolensk. The problem is she doesn't get the smoke with that. Instead, she tries to be a radar cruiser with like 8 6-inch guns, but she doesn't have that much impressive firepower. Instead, she's kind of more of a utility ship where she gets excellent radar and a very good, respectable. She gets respectable firepower on top of her radar, so she's really good against destroyers, but she's also pretty fragile, not very easy to play. And yeah, I would just rather be in something like a Wichita or a Baltimore, because it seems to do very similar things, just a lot more forgiving.
Yep, for sure. What about the Bagration?
Pyotr Bagration? Pyotr is a kind of a weird ship. I thought, first glance, you would think that she would be the Tech Tree ship instead of the Talon, because her layout and playstyle seems reminiscent of the Riga and the Petropavlovsk.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It looks pretty much like a mini Riga at this point. Yeah, it does.
Mm-hmm. You even get a heal on top of that, which is not very common for a tier 8. But in any case, I did mention the Riga and the Petro for a good reason, and the playstyle is pretty similar. So she goes bow in, she wants to smash broadside ships. If she does, great. If not, well, at least she can sit bow in and have a heal. So if you want a Petro tier 8 and actually be balanced, then go ahead, take the Piotr. If you want a traditional cruiser, go get something else.
Alright, so what about the mains? Personally, mains is one of my top favorite doubloon ships in the game. It's definitely one of the top farmers in operations for credits right now. Also does an amazing random ship as well for long to medium distance farming with HE. Has amazingly high DPM for the guns. Okay-ish armor, but the main problem is it does not have a heal. So it does take a little bit of skill to use, but in operations, it does do amazingly well for farming credits. Can definitely make a good bang for your buck for this ship in particular. It's also a nice crew trainer as well, if you're trying to crew train for the Germans. But what do you think of the mains overall, SAT?
Excellent damage farming machine. You do have to be careful because of her lower maneuverability, and her somewhat floaty shells. But if you can overcome those few weaknesses, she is a damage farming monster. And that is easily apparent in operation, but you can also get good use out of her in ranked and in randoms and even ranked, if you know how to position her. So yeah, it does require some experience to play effectively. So maybe not the first choice if you're completely new to cruisers, but if you have some experience and just want something to burn the entire server down, mains is a good choice.
Yep, for sure. What about the Saipan? I personally do not recommend the Saipan. It's like on one of the bottom list of CVs that you can buy, but I'll let SAT score cover it.
Saipan's gimmick is that she carries less planes, but those few planes will hit harder and are tankier. She's actually one of the best torpedo bombers because her torps are the hardest hitting. I think they hit even harder than Kaga, but you have to be very careful about your reserves. Because if you don't manage them properly, the slow reload time and the low amount of planes you have will cripple you for the rest of the game. That being said, her dive bombers also hit pretty well, and her Tiny Tim rockets are good against larger ships. So she can be effective when played right, but her margin of error is not very... There's not much room for error. So I wouldn't recommend a ship unless you're very experienced and you just don't mind playing a very hard ship.
Yep, moving on. Let's talk about the Prince Eugene. To me, the Prince Eugene is more of the tanky tier 8 German cruiser for the premium ships for the balloons at tier 8 for the Germans. Overall, I would say if you want a more tanky tier 8 cruiser with a heal, I would say get the Eugene. But if you want more of a farmer, go for the mains. Sorry, the mines. But what do you think of the Prince overall?
You get her more for her history than for her gameplay. She's pretty tanky in the game, but at the same time, there's better ships out there that we'll cover in a bit that I would rather take over Prince Eugen just because they're also pretty durable, but more importantly have much more firepower.
Yep. So let's talk about the Atago. The Atago is one of the longest premium ships in the game. It is still very strong to this day. Great guns, great concealment, great maneuverability, good torpedoes, good heal as well. Overall, I say this ship is a really good ship in randoms, but for operations, I don't think it does as well due to the longer reload on the guns, but I'll let SAT score cover it.
Yep, Bo got it pretty much right. She is one of the oldest premiums in the game, and still also one of the most commonly recommended because she has a good combination of durability and firepower. Her torps are also icing on the cake since you can torp ships that are coming at you, or even rush them in certain situations. Overall, a good all-around ship with, I mean, she kind of has limited range and a somewhat raised citadel, but if you know how to angle, she is an absolute menace to get rid of.
For sure, for sure. Let's talk about the submarine in the room, the S-189. Would you recommend the S-189 to the submarine enjoyers?
While I don't recommend submarines in general, S-189, I'm not so familiar with subs. Let me double check what her gimmick was, because I think it was like pretty... Was it like very strong non-homing torpedoes and the weak homing ones?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. High-speed artillery torpedoes, long-range torpedoes, slow reload. Slow reload on the torpedoes, though, unfortunately. So
Yeah,
pretty much
the
plays
homing
kind
one...
of to a... Yeah.
The homing torpedoes hit like pillows, while the normal torpedoes, I mean, they have pretty good range and they hit relatively hard, but they're also not homing, so they won't hit as often.
Yeah, for
I
sure,
mean,
for
not
sure.
honestly, I can't really recommend or a for or against just because I don't have experience in the ship.
All right, what about the I-56?
I-56, I mean, she's kind of the Gato before Gato got nuked. She's more for spamming torpedoes at range and farming. Like, her torpedoes hit hard, but she doesn't get much dive capacity and generally doesn't. I mean, she's kind of tanky as well. Her main gimmick is actually the SAP gun, which is kind of hilarious to duel destroyers and other submarines with. Not something you want to do against a cruiser or battleship, but it's pretty hilarious for a sub to gun down destroyers. Not an easy ship though, because they did remove the minimum. They introduced a minimum range on her torpedoes, which makes shotgunning not really possible. I wouldn't recommend subs in general, and while I think I-56 would be an interesting ship, I can't say I would recommend for or against just because I don't have that experience.
Yep. Moving on, the next ship is going to be the Fen Yang. Would you recommend the Fen Yang?
Fen Yang, I mean, she's been memed as one of the worst destroyers, and while many people will still meme on her for that, she's gotten numerous buffs that kind of make her more of an underdog than an actual bad ship. She's meant to be an AP spamming destroyer. She sees a broadside ship, she goes AP spam, even on other destroyers. And with that, she can... those AP rounds have better arming angles and will generally fuse even on like lightly armored ships. So any destroyer that shows broadside to her will get destroyed very quickly. Her torpedoes also got buffs, so it can hit cruisers and battleships as well. It's still a tough destroyer to play because you have to rely more on that AP. The HE is good for starting fires, but if you're trying to rely on her HE, you're not using a ship properly. And the Akazuki hull is pretty slow. So she has potential, to be good, but you have to know her limitations to get the most out of her, because people will meme on her, and for a good reason. But you can turn that against them as they underestimate your ship.
Yeah, I get forced to play this ship called the Smasha, which is a clone of the Fen Yang, and they underestimate that AP salvo from that thing, and man, does it do a lot of damage. It can be a lot of fun to play, but very painful if people know what you're doing. Moving on, let's talk about the Silly Wongi. Do you think the Silly Wongi is as silly as its name is, or do you think it's a good ship to buy?
It's a very silly ship for certain, because it gets 5.5 hydro. It's kind of a weird Ognavoid that gets utility. Her guns are not exactly the best, and she does get decent torpedoes, but the main draw, she's kind of like Oh, she gets deep water torpedoes.
Yes.
She's kind of similar to the Lo Yang in that sense. She gets amazing hydro, but trades a lot of firepower for that. I don't know if it's worth it outside of a division, though.
For sure. What about the Orkan?
Orkan is kind of like a tier 8 Smolensk, but actually balanced. So her claim to fame is having radar and respectable DPM. But the funny thing is, while her radar is undeniably useful, her DPM, she actually won't outgun many of the other destroyers she fights. And while I think she gets heals, right?
She does, yes.
Heal
she
and speed
heals,
boost.
Yep.
The problem, her speed boost is the normal 8%. She doesn't get the crazy small and speed boost. So you have to be a lot more careful on how you choose your fights. She is a very good support destroyer, but not that game-breaking level that Smolensk can claim. I wouldn't recommend her just because there's actually just actual good options instead of the budget option, that budget Smolensk option. Yeah, get a different destroyer.
Yeah, what about the Z35? I don't really see too many Z35s running around.
Z35 is kind of an awkward gunship. So it has the same arcs as the Z23. Its guns are meant to farm bigger ships since they pen 32mm of armor, and she gets hydro to defend herself. In a sense, you could kind of you can make comparisons between her and the tier 9 Groningen. They're both gunships, but obviously Z35 gets different kind of guns, and she actually gets torpedoes. And she gets the British smoke. So yeah. So I guess really she's more of a weird gunboat. There's now that I think about it, there's not really much comparisons I could do. She's not considered a very good gunboat, but in my opinion, she's more underestimated. She got buffed. She's just kind of all over the place on what she does, and that doesn't mean she's good in any one aspect. So, yeah, she has potential, can gun down other destroyers. She doesn't gun down other destroyers directly, but can farm bigger ships much easier. She gets torpedoes for close range, and she has hydro to avoid getting torped herself. But at the same time, she is still relatively easy to kill, so I'm not even sure what to make of her because she's all over the place. Yeah, I just wouldn't really recommend her overall.
I wouldn't really recommend it at all either. What about the Duke of York? The Duke of York has a really strong AP with the reduced ricocheting for the AP. It does also have access to hydro. It's one of the few tier 7 British ships that have hydro. So a lot of people are thrown out of the loop whenever they see a Duke of York rushing them, and then they get something like hydroed. So you can always be a little bit sneaky that way, but do you think people should buy the Duke of York, or do you think people should buy the Hood if they were going to buy one of them? What do you think?
I would actually prefer the Hood, but Duke of York is not a bad ship. She just gets overshadowed by her tech tree cousin, the King George V.
Yep.
And also of note, she is available for coal if you're looking to go buy her for that instead.
Yep, that is true. If you don't want to buy the Duke of York, you can get her for coal instead. Now, talking about the Hood, what do you think about the Hood? Do you think the Hood is a good choice for buying, or do you think it's not really a good choice for buying?
Hood did get buffed a couple times over the years. She's one of the few ships with few battleships with improved AP angles. But unlike the Duke of York, her 15-inch guns lets her overmatch more important parts of armor. So her AP shells are really scary when fighting other same tier or lower cruisers. And she is a large ship, so her HP pool will go down pretty quickly. But she does have a history behind her. So if you like tier 7 combat and want to get revenge on the Bismarck, then Hood's actually a pretty decent choice.
Moving on, let's talk about the Cossack. Yeah, Cossack is probably one of the best tier 8 DDs that you can buy in the game. Strong guns, strong torpedoes, good maneuverability, great concealment, good stripper smoke, and hydro. This thing is pretty much the perfect package for you gunboat-loving DD enjoyers. But what do you think, SAT, about the Cossack?
Sometimes I wonder why they haven't removed her yet. She is amazing gunboat, can easily take out any other destroyer. Fast reloading smokes, speed boost, self-defense hydro. Just the only two bad things about her is the lack of torpedoes. Well, you get one rack, and the one rack of torpedoes and the slow shells. But both the latter, at least you can compensate for skill. Overall, a very good gunboat, and a very common sight in rank because of her ability to bully other destroyers.
And moving on, let's talk about the Collingwood. Would you recommend the Collingwood nowadays?
So if you wanted a Nelson but couldn't actually get the Nelson or the Rodney and had to settle for a third-party vendor, then Collingwood is the result. Not a very good result, may I add. You get main battery reload booster, and you get the same guns as Lion, but her firepower just isn't really that good, and you're stuck with the Nelson hull, which is not very good either. Not a ship I would recommend.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the exact same as you on that one. What about the Yukon?
Yukon is basically a tier 7 Monarch. It gets a super heal, but the main problem is that the firing range is absurdly short at 15.7 kilometers. It is good in same tier or lower matchmaking, but if you fight off against tier 8s, tier 9s in the larger maps, you're gonna go cry.
Yeah, it's going to be extremely painful if you get up to it at all in this ship, so I don't really recommend this ship for tier 7s. What about the Hyuga?
Hyuga is one of the few tier 7 ships I would recommend. She's essentially the same as Bo's favorite ship, the Fuso, but she gets the main battery reload booster, which makes her a super Fuso in a sense. Very good at punishing broadside ships. And the main battery reload booster reloads very quickly. So if you know how to play Fuso, then you know how to play the Hyuga. And Hyuga is a pretty solid ship.
Yep, moving on, let's talk about the Stratusborg. I don't recommend this ship. It's like a tier 7 Dunkirk. So for me, I don't really recommend it, but what do you think about this one?
It is effectively a tier 7 Dunkirk, but with reload booster. Not good enough. You will hate the ship. Next.
Next is going to be the Florida. Yay or nay for Florida?
You have to say yes because you're of obligation. I will say yes because she's a decent battlecruiser-ish. Her hull sucks, but having battlecruiser accuracy on her guns, even though they reload relatively slowly, is pretty fun.
She also has a 21-kilometer range as well, and that's without using the spotter. So it's a very good long-range shooter. So if you do get up to the tier 9, you can keep your distance and do some long-range HE throwing, which this ship does very well at distance.
Pretty solid battleship. If you don't, especially since you get up tiered, you're like, whatever.
Yeah, moving on, let's talk about the California, the bathtub of tier 7.
I don't recommend her, even though she's gotten a couple boosts. Florida is just overall still better, even if California gets improved acceleration and better AA.
Yep, so not recommended. What about the Le Terrible?
Le Terrible. If you want a more gunboat version of the Le Fantasque, then Le Terrible is a very good option. In fact, she's actually served as the prototype for the French destroyer line before they were introduced. And Le Terrible is a very good ship on her own right. A little bit hard to use if you're not used to gunboating, but once you do learn how the French destroyers work, she will punch just as hard as the rest.
Yep, very good information there. What about the Scharnhorst? Would you recommend the Scharnhorst nowadays?
I mean, Scharnhorst has always been a decent tier 7, but she's kind of overshadowed now by the Scharnhorst 43.
Yep.
And that's not to say Scharnhorst, normal Scharnhorst is anything bad. It's just that Scharnhorst 43 is much more fun to use. But if you don't, I would say just kind of wait for 43 to come back. But if you're not patient enough, then fine, just get the Scharnhorst.
Yep, for sure, for sure. What about the Ashitaka?
Ashitaka, she's basically the key A-hull. So she has negative AA, but her she has 10 10mm guns, and those hurt very hard for her tier. As long as you're not getting harassed by CV, she's a very strong battleship. And honestly, it's kind of a crime that she doesn't get mentioned more often.
Yeah, her guns are pretty damn accurate for a tier 7. Now, let's talk about the Kid. What do you think about the Kid? It's got a good heal, smoke, engine boost, or DFA, but of course you recommend...
Is their mic working?
Oh, yeah? Uh-oh. No. Internet! Okay.
Alright, we should be good now.
Can you hear me now, or no?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, internet messed up. Alright, give me 1 second. Alright, so what about the Kid? So, moving on. What about the Kid?
Another contender for the most powerful tier 8 destroyer. She works a little bit differently than Kozak. She has very good firepower, but instead of the better concealment, she gets a heal, and she has US smoke, and also, she's similar except she gets heal and the US smoke. So she's a much better support option, and she's also well known for the role she plays in the infamous Kid Akazuki anti-CV division.
Yep. Moving on, let's talk about the Atlanta, the legendary Atlanta. Would you recommend the Atlanta?
Atlanta, I think she's literally the first premium wargame among the first batch of premiums wargaming introduced. And she has her niche. She's very strong in ranked, where she can use her radar to obliterate destroyers and farm out other ships. But at the same time, she's also extremely fragile. So if you're not careful with her placement, she's going to get blown up super quickly. So a very high risk, high reward ship. If you like that kind of gameplay and you have some experience, then take the Atlanta. She will be very fun to play in ranked. If you're not good with such high risk, high reward ships, or just don't like squishy cruisers in general, go look somewhere else.
Yep, for sure. Let's see. Let's do the Abruzzi. What about the Abruzzi?
Abruzzi is a Italian light cruiser, but she's not like the other Italian cruisers because she was released far before the concept of the Italian line was being debated on. So she's essentially a standard cruiser with heal and good handling. Not very exciting, and I think her DPM is actually on the lower end. Not a ship I would recommend.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same boat as you on that ship for sure. What about the Tolan? I know that the Tolan has great guns. Very slow reload on them though, but they're very strong for the tier. And the thing is, it only has 8 guns on the front. So even though it has good guns on the front, it's very vulnerable from the rear and the side. And the armor also isn't the best either. But what is your take on this weird ship?
I'm half debating whether I should take Strasbourg over her.
Well,
which is not a good thing.
Yeah, well, there you go. That means the ship is not very good. So moving on, let's talk about the Maya.
Maya's an interesting ship because she's in her 1944 configuration, which is technically a downgrade from the Ataco. But in any case, she gets 8-kilometer torpedoes, which makes her sort of strong at close range if you don't get citadeled. She only gets 4 guns and they reload slower, but she gets main battery reload booster to compensate. So she's fine for a tier 7. And she gets stronger in like ranked, where you get an opportunity to close in with torpedoes. But overall, she's still kind of a hard sell outside of that. She's more for fun rather than just for a good ship.
Yep. So the next ship is going to be the Weimar.
Weimar. Weimar and the München are pretty similar ships. Let me double check, because I sometimes will get the two confused. I don't want to make that mistake here. Weimar is the one with 12 guns. She's the one with kind of like, she is a short range but very fast, very maneuverable ship. I would say she's the better of them because she's a lot. She has more firepower and she's a lot more agile. So if you want a fun ship to play at tier 7, then she's actually good for that. I would have normally recommended her for operations, but they're no longer at tier 7, so kind of sad otherwise.
Wait, operations aren't in tier 7 anymore?
No, she's just outclassed by tier 8 options.
Oh, true. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So yeah, overall, you'd recommend the Weimar more than the München. So there's that one. So moving on, let's talk about the Nueve and the Boise.
Of those, I would recommend the Boise because you can retrain your American captains on her. Nueve, you can get her for the history, and if you want to train the Pan-American captains, but they don't synergize with the Boise's build at all. Just keep that in mind. So, as back to the ship, though, Boise is very similar to Helena, but trades considerable firepower for a heal. A super heal at that. But there's a catch. The super heal, while nice, there's not that much you can heal back. So by the third heal, you'll already not be able to heal at 100%. That being said, having durability in a cruiser is at that tier is pretty rare. So Boise is a pretty nice ship to have, even if your range is so super limited at 13.6 kilometers, I think.
Yep, it's not the best range. It's very short range on the guns. So unfortunate for that. Moving on, let's talk about the Loeng. How would you rate the Loeng? The Loeng, to me, is one of the top tier 8 Ds you can currently buy in World of Warships. It has a nice smoke. Now, you have an option of engine boost, defensive 8, or hydro acoustic, but the hydro search is what makes the ship really strong with the 5.5 kilometer hydro and the 5.8 kilometer concealment. It makes it a really strong DD hunter with that smoke and the hydro combo. But what do you think there, SAT?
I like her more as a support ship. She has that hydro and smoke for your allies, but her own firepower is pretty lacking. So if you want to play solo, you're going to have to rely a lot on your teammates, which I personally don't like. But if you don't mind that sort of gameplay, then Loeng is very strong.
Yep. What about the Lazo? We're starting to go down the list. We're kind of almost there. Oh,
we can rapid fire the rest since they're low tiers. Anyways, Lazo is the very similar to Shores, except she trades a bit of speed for a spotter plane. And the spotter plane is unique in that its uptime is almost infinite. So just stay at range, spam HE, but otherwise have the same playstyle as the Russian cruisers. Not bad, not good, just your typical light cruiser.
Yep. What about the Indianapolis or the West Virginia? Would you recommend either of those?
West Virginia 41 or 44?
41.
41 is a tier 6. It's kind of the tier 6 version of Colorado. She's pretty strong down there. So if you want to battleship it and you play tier 6 pretty often, West Virginia is a good candidate. Indianapolis is a decent tier 7 ship. She's gotten much stronger because of the bow armor changes. So if you want a good ranked cruiser for tier 7 and you want to punish Fijis and destroyers, Indianapolis is your option. But I wouldn't take her into randoms. I would take West Virginia 41 into randoms though. She's much more forgiving.
What about the Frederick, Arizona, or Mutsu?
Arizona, you're mostly getting her for the historical purposes, especially if it's around December 7th. She is a pretty solid ship, but just like in real life, she doesn't like getting attacked by planes. As for Mutsu, she is she's kind of similar to West Virginia, but her armor is notably worse. But she does get Mimi close-range torpedoes that will catch many ships, many players unaware. And then the last one, Prince Idol Frederick. She's I would say, decent option. She's kind of like a more battlecruiser-ish, but not quite battlecruiser level of secondaries. Pretty durable otherwise, but I'd recommend the Mutsu over her. Arizona, as I said, more of a historical thing, but I think West Virginia 41 is better overall as a ship.
Yep, so the next ships are going to be the Novo, FR-25, and the Repulse. The Novo is pretty much the Caesar, the unattainable Caesar, the Jezere that is unavailable, no longer to get. This is what they were wanting to do with it, which was going to be get one tier higher and nerfing it. So I personally do not recommend the Novo at all. There's a lot of better tier 6 options to get, so I'm just going to skip right over the Novo. I do not recommend that ship at all. What about the FR-25 or the Repulse?
Repulse is a pretty solid battlecruiser. She relies on her mobility to get around, and while her guns are more accurate, having six barrels is not the most reliable in the world. But basically, stereotypical battlecruiser gameplay: get to the sides, punch holes in the broadside ships, bully cruisers, and run away if you see a real battleship. Pretty good ship if you know what you're doing. As for the FR-25, she tries to be a Apollo Emilio at tier 7, but is not actually a very good ship, and sucks at being an Apollo Emilio. Just go get something else.
Yeah, get something else. What about the Issei, Warspite, and Bjorn?
Issei. Issei's claim to fame is having Congo firepower, really good AA for a Japanese battleship, and most importantly, you get torpedo bombers. So yeah, she was the first original hybrid battleship to be released. And oh man, it caused a lot of controversy when she was released.
Oh yeah, it was. I remember that controversy.
That being said, she's actually balanced, / maybe not even very good. Her planes are memey, and they can be fun to use, but her guns, they're Congo guns. And the firing angles are even worse. So you're gonna experience pain. But you'll also experience joy when you get to torpedo someone and watch him rage in chat. So your mileage may vary.
Yep. What about the Warspite and Bjorn?
Warspite, also one of the first premiums to be released in World Warships. And they actually changed her a long time ago, but that's not relevant to right now. She has amazing turning radius of 500, which is better than every other ship in the game, except for very low tier destroyers. She also gets cruiser DCP, and she's a battleship. And true to her history, she is a very formidable battleship in game as well. I would recommend getting her. But that being said, she is possible to obtain for newer players if they once you get to level 6, if I remember correctly. Either that, or if you recruit a player and they get to a certain level, then the recruiter gets the Warspite. I don't remember on top of my head though. As for the Béarn, it is a tier 6 French carrier that hates other carriers with a passion. So if you it gets skip bombers and AP dive bombers. And more importantly, it gets like 10 fighters per fighter squadron, which will absolutely decimate any carrier planes it comes across. So if you want to get complimented by your teammates every single game, then take Interceptor, hover over the enemy carrier, and laugh, as you've basically just ruined their entire game.
It is pretty hilarious to do that. It is pretty hilarious. What about the Ark Royale?
Ark Royale is a ship you want to bully if you want to destroy a certain battleship's rudder. Her planes are pretty slow though. The hull has very high detection. So it's kind of a challenge to get her planes into combat. But when they do, they actually hit they hit respectably hard. But otherwise they're kind of pretty typical for a British carrier. You have carpet bombers, you have the torpedo bombers, and you've got rockets. Ideally, you want to use the torpedo bombers more often, and maybe the carpet bombers if you hate destroyers.
Yep. Now about the Mysore and the London. Would you recommend these, or would you not recommend them?
Mysore is kind of it's like the Commonwealth version of the Fiji. You get one less gun, but you get a crawling smoke. One less gun, and I mean like one less turret. So you get 9 guns instead of the standard 12. Otherwise, kind of a weird ship. Not something I would recommend most of the time. What was the other ship?
It was the London.
London, tier 6 heavy cruiser. Kind of rare in that she gets both a smoke and a heal. But her problem is that she has a limited gun range and her surface detection is quite high. Oh, and her smoke fire penalty is pretty high. So there's only a narrow opportunity where you can use her guns, which doesn't have that much firepower anyways. Kind of an awkward ship to use, and I would not recommend it overall unless you are willing to learn the intricacies of the ship.
Yep, very well said. So we're talking about the Dunkirk, Texas, and Revolutia. Dunkirk, we were talking about the Strasbourg earlier and said that this is pretty much, the Strasbourg is a tier higher Dunkirk. So would you recommend the Dunkirk? It does have 8 guns, high maneuverability. All the guns are on the bow, but it does not have the best armor though.
Dunkirk is pretty funny because while the guns have small caliber, it's actually one of the highest penetrations at tier 6. I'm not joking. It has better AP pen than most other battleships. So the idea is play it at range, go find a broadside target, and snipe it with your guns. And then move up as able. Not a very tanky ship, as he said, and the concealment's actually pretty bad. But with her high velocity guns, you can think of her as the original Slava before Slava was ever introduced. So she can be fun under the right situations, but I would honestly take a more versatile battleship. Not to say that Dunkirk is bad though, just more underestimated.
Yep. Moving on, let's talk about the legendary Texas. Would you recommend the legendary Texas?
Only if your money is going to support the actual USS Texas and her restoration. Otherwise, I would avoid. Because she's basically a New York with AA. And New York is not a very good ship. Adding A on top of it does not make Texas a good ship.
Yep, very true, very true. What about the Revolutia? For me, the Revolutia is one of the best tier 5 battleships to get that you currently can get. You can also get it for coal as well, so I'd highly recommend getting the Revolutia for coal. You don't need to get it for doubloons, but I would definitely recommend getting it for coal. If you want to spend money on it, then I would definitely recommend it. Has amazing guns, good HE, good AP, very tanky as well with how the armor is. Great tier 5 crew trainer as well for the Russians. So highly would recommend the Revolutia for sure. What about the Rio, Agnacourt, and the Schoenberg?
Carl. Please don't get the Carl. I don't know what Wargaming did to it, but they didn't make it good.
Yeah, this DD, I don't even want to, it's dog water. It's terrible.
Yep. As for the Agincourt and the Rio de Janeiro, Rio is more of a generic battleship with 14 guns because the British decided in their infinite wisdom that 6 turrets was not enough, so they made 7.
Yep, they want to add as many turrets as possible, so you got the Rio. Agnacourt is the tier 5 legendary meme AP only secondary brawler for the tier 5s for the British. It does have no anti-air though, so if you're in any type of match with CVs, good luck.
You can think of it as you can think of Agincourt as the Tier 5 version of Sleethen. Walk in, watch your secondaries start demolishing everything. And then cry as the carrier just harasses you because you can literally do nothing against them.
Yep, it is the big sads for sure. Moving on, let's just start speed running this. Leon, Juria, and Verberus.
Leon, it's got US smoke. The guns are awkward. It gets 13-kilometer torpedoes. I have no idea what Wargaming was trying to do with this ship, and yeah. And probably Wargaming doesn't know the answer either. Just don't play the ship. Get something better.
Juria and Verberus.
So Juria is very similar to... It's basically the Gallant, except in the Pan-American ship. It gets normal smoke, single-fire torpedoes. It's literally a generic destroyer. Not something I would recommend, honestly. There is literally the Eagle, which is much better.
Yep, that is very true. What about the Verberus?
Verberus?
Mm-hmm.
Hold on, what ship? Let me double check what ship that is.
It is like the little pocket battleship. The little squirt of a battleship.
Verberus Unitus?
Yes.
So that ship is bad. It's got good concealment, but it's otherwise not very good.
It does have a lot of armor all over it.
Yeah, but it also has like no HP, so you get torped once by the hundreds of kamikazes, or Julio shoots you once, goodbye half your HP. Doesn't matter you had armor.
Very true, very true. So moving on, let's talk about the Sims, the Perth, and the Bluswakia.
Sims is unusual because she is a US destroyer with either pretty good close-range torpedoes or 9.2 long-range, literally no-damage torpedoes. What's unique about her is her base EXP gains. She's actually the only ship in the entire game that has improved base EXP gains. But otherwise, she's a pretty typical US destroyer, highly maneuverable, pretty good firepower, and a pretty solid option for a Tier 7 destroyer, just not high to level. As for Boyskavica, she is a very historical ship, but she's more of a gunboat now. Pretty solid guns, but her surface detection is pretty bad. Not a ship I would recommend. I'd just rather get a Russian gunboat instead.
And last for that side is going to be the Perth. What do you think of the Perth?
Also a pretty old premium. She's the first. I believe she is actually the first ship they did the crawling smoke on.
It was.
She's a pretty solid cruiser. Like, I won't say anything bad about her. She's, I would say, overall above average, especially since she can hide in smoke, unlike many other cruisers at her tier. And she gets spotter playing for whatever reason.
Yep. Moving on, let's talk about the Duca, Agil, and Modigan. I know you were just talking about the Agil earlier. You said you would recommend the Agil. And why'd you say that?
Agil is a pretty solid destroyer. She technically has the French nationality, but doesn't have any of the French characteristics. Treat her as a normal destroyer, but she's relatively fast, has smoke, relatively good guns. Overall, pretty solid ship.
And what about the Duca?
Duca d'Aosta, unremarkable ship.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, nothing I can really note about her other than Italian, not very good, and actually not actually Italian because she has HE, no SAP.
Damn. What about the Modigan?
Which one?
The Modigan.
Oh, Monahan?
Yeah, Monahan. Yeah.
Monahan is Wargame's experiment into multi-hull ships. So the A hull of Monahan is basically a farragut, one less gun but better concealment, and still close range torpedoes. B hull is a very unique addition though, because she trades two guns for better torpedoes. So while her firepower literally gets cut in half, she gets Benson torpedoes and a torpedo reload booster on top of that. So basically it goes from mini Farragut to mini Japanese destroyer, kind of like a Akatsuki or a Kagero. I mean, if you want a unique ship, go ahead and play her, but she's not a particularly strong ship. But if you want to have fun in a torpedo destroyer, that's Monahan's a good option.
All right, the next ship is going to be the Molotov, Gallant, and Kirov.
Gallant, I've already covered with the Jura. It's basically a generic destroyer, generic smoke, British destroyer guns, 8-kilometer torpedoes. Nothing really remarkable to note, to be honest.
Okay.
Molotov, a typical Russian cruiser, actually has pretty nice AP, but she explodes faster than any of the other Russian cruisers, which is honestly an achievement in its own right. So if you're able to kite and stay safe at long range, Molotov is actually a pretty decent damage farmer. It's just that one mistake and you're going back to port.
Yep, for sure. What about the... You said the Molotov, right?
Yes.
All right, so the Kirov. What do you think about the Kirov? Tier 5 cruiser. Doesn't have a heal. Armor isn't the best. Great guns, though.
Yeah, it's a heavy cruiser that wants to punish other light cruisers, and she gets punished herself by battleships. So she's just kind of unlucky.
Yeah, very unpoggers.
Not a ship I recommend.
All right, we're almost done with this list. We're almost done. Genova?
Your second favorite ship?
I hate this ship. It's terrible.
Yeah. Basically, it's a Tier 5 Italian heavy cruiser. Slow guns, slow reloading guns, but they punish destroyers whenever they hit. Too bad boat can't hit anything with them.
Lies. Yagi and Exeter.
Exeter, kind of a weird ship. She gets smoked just like London. I don't think she gets healed though. But she basically tries to hide.
Exeter gets a repair party hydro, and fighter does not get a smoke.
Oh, other way around. Okay, she gets a repair party. She doesn't die. She's better than the Hawkins, but that's not saying that much. If you want a Tier 5 heavy cruiser and you like to bully other light cruisers with your 8-inch guns, Exeter is a decent choice. But honestly, just get a battleship at that point. Because Giulio Cesare's and the kamikazes will just make your life miserable.
Yep. So what about the Yagi?
Yahagi, her gimmick is having DFAA in a tier where DFA does not matter.
Yep, pretty much. So
otherwise, a torpedo boat, not much else to add other than why are we buying her?
What about the Anshin, Sirocco, and Dreadnought?
Anshin, also a very old premium. She's unique in that she gets improved free EXP earnings, but otherwise performs pretty much very similarly to the Fushun, which is the Tier 6 Pan-Asian destroyer. Anshin is a pretty respectable gunboat, but her turret traverse is god-awful. So kind of be careful when using her and have your guns aimed properly. She's a solid Tier 6 ship though, and her 8-kilometer torpedoes makes her a pretty good hybrid destroyer in general.
Yep. What about the Sirocco?
Sirocco is a Tier 5 French destroyer. She essentially is the Tier 4 French destroyer Bourg-Resque or something.
Yeah.
But with a reload booster. If anything, Jaguar is kind of the odd one out because she is a super big destroyer, doesn't have reload booster, just doesn't really do French stuff other than saturation. Sirocco is kind of like a mini gunboat that just likes to bully other destroyers.
That makes it pretty good then. What about the Dreadnought?
Dreadnought is a Tier 3 battleship. You're going to miss everything in her, but she is also the first first proper battleship ever created. So you're buying her for historical purposes.
Yeah, moving on. What about the Hill, the Marble, and the Marble L?
Marblehead L are the same ship, and those are very similar to the tech tree Omaha. In other words, you have good firepower, but you also love to explode. If you want to test your skill in dodging enemy battleships, then take the Marblehead, because if you're able to play cruisers really well, you can actually farm absurd amounts of damage in those ships.
Yeah, I've done. I've played the Murmansk, which is the pretty much exact same thing as the Marbleheads. It's like the Omaha, and I've done over 100k damage easy in that ship. So if you know how to dodge and just use your guns, you can do a lot of damage with those ships.
The one thing about Marblehead, though, is that her torps literally do no damage. They do like 4k or something ridiculously bad.
Yeah, they're rapid reloading, but low damage.
Yeah, so just be careful if you're trying to do a drive-by on enemy ship.
Yeah, the difference with the Murmansk and the Marbleheads, it has heavy torpedo damage, so the reloads on the torps are way longer. And what about the Hill?
Hill is a gunboat version of the Nicholas. It cannot stealth torp. It has torpedoes on both sides, so it can actually rush pretty well. But it's meant to just kind of get in close, kill everything with its guns, and hopefully continue farming in smoke.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to counter the seal clubbing of the kamikazes, Hill is probably your best bet.
All right, moving on from that, let's talk about the Krispy Kreme and the War Canoe. To me, the War Canoe or the Altnik is one of my favorite DDs in the game. It just has so many torpedoes, and when the Russians designed this ship, it's like, all right, let's just put as many guns and torpedoes as possible. So this thing is a very practical meme ship. Its AP can actually citadel cruisers that are broadside, and it can do a lot of HE damage to DDs, but the turret traverse is very slow, and the torpedoes have a very short range of 4.5 kilometers with a rapid reload. So you can, if you're able to get close to battleships using smoke or from an island, you can dev strike every battleship that you find.
Mm-hmm. Ochotnik is a very fun ship. You just have to be careful with your aim because, as Bo said, you fire one salvo every couple of years, but those salvos really hurt.
And what about the Krispy Kreme?
So no one knows why Warhammer released her originally, because she got heavily memed upon, and to this day, we're not sure why she's still around, because she kind of sucks.
Yeah.
She's everyone's favorite punching bag.
That's why it's called Krispy Kreme.
Yep, and if someone takes her into battle, it's probably because they accidentally selected her in port and meant to play a different ship.
Very unfortunate. All right, let's talk about the Ishizushi, Yubari, and Aurora.
Aurora, low-tier cruiser shenanigans. I'm not sure what I can add here. The main reason you get her is because you got it for free somehow, or you're a fan of Russian history because she is famous for firing the first shot in the Russian Revolution.
That's super cool information. What about the Yubari?
Yubari is... hold on, let me double check.
It has DFAA.
It's one of those ships where it's been around for a while. Didn't we cover Yubari then?
No, there was a tier 5.
Oh, Yahagi? I got the two confused. So Yahagi is basically the Agano premium version. I wouldn't recommend Agano, so I don't recommend Yahagi. Anyways, right. Yubari, DFAA, nothing special about her other than that. Why are we getting her?
Yeah, exactly. What about the Ishikazuchi?
Pretty good tier 4 premium battleship. She also is one of the oldest in the game, and I'm not sure why Wargame is still selling her. In any case, she's, other than being a Japanese tier 4 premium, she's pretty typical for a Japanese battleship. So, once you get out of the low tiers, there's not really much reason to play her.
Mm-hmm.
So, You probably got her for free, or you found her rotting in port and were like, what is this ship?
Yeah, what about the Katori, Yag, and Oleg?
Varyag and Oleg, they're Russian cruisers. They're low-tier cruisers. You have guns, you shoot them at people, you get torped by destroyers.
I like how it just says no clear advantages or disadvantages for both of them. And then Katori is just a different one.
Katori is historically was a training ship in the Japanese Navy, so she has a little bit of everything. But uniquely, one of her upgrades gives her absurd accuracy on her guns. Something like L-beam levels of accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
But other than being kind of hard to get beforehand, there's not really any reason to get to Katori right now, because it's a tier 3. You're going to be out of tier 3 and stop beating up bots pretty soon. So no need to buy Katori unless you really like her history.
What about the Charleston, Mikasa, and Campbelltown? We're almost done. We almost did all of the doubloon ships in WoWs.
Alright, so Charleston is Perennium St. Louis. Slight differences in gun angles and other areas, but otherwise it's effectively the same as the St. Louis. The tier 3 version, may I add. And it's a monster.
Yeah, St. Louis is legit a monster at tier 3.
If you love seal clubbing, take the St. Louis. You will bully destroyers, other cruisers, and bot battleships. If you, as for the other ships, Mikasa, tier 2 battleship, and the only one at tier 2. She is a hilarious secondary monster. And she will absolutely tear apart bots, no problems at all.
Mm-hmm.
She is probably one of the most famous ships in this entire list because she was the flagship of Admiral Togo in the Russo-Japanese War. And she is actually she's still here today as a museum ship. So go ahead and check her out, and then buy the Mikasa in game and have fun with her secondaries. And the last ship is Campbellton. She is a Wix-class destroyer, most famous for her role in the Saint Nazaire raid, in which they YOLO'd the Campbellton and blew up the docks there. But here, she doesn't have anything special for ramming. She's literally just a Wix with some guns and some torpedoes. She just does stuff. What else am I supposed to add?
Yeah,
it's low tiers.
What about the Dianelle, and Albany?
All protected cruisers, pretty old. I forgot what their histories were. Go on. It's a tier 2 cruiser. There's nothing remarkable down there.
And then what about the Emden, Smith, and what about any of these down here?
Smith is probably the cheapest premium at 99 cents. You get the Smith, you fire torpedoes every 10 seconds because it's funny. You shoot guns every once in a while because it's funny. And you have long-lasting smoke because it's funny. And then all that fun for 99 cents, which is good for a game or two.
That is a pretty good deal for sure.
Yep. If you want to know how how to play World of Warships, and you want to see if you want to invest money or not, then 99 cents is a pretty good deal. It's better than cheaper than a meal nowadays. As for the last ship, what was the last ship again?
Tachibanas.
Okay. Tachibana. If you like a tier 2 ship and you want to torpedo everything for days, and you're a particularly evil person, then Tachibana is a good ship to play. Because all she does is torpedo ships and makes everyone else's life miserable.
Yep. So that is it. We have covered all the doubloon ships and World of Warships. So thank you, SAT Score, for all the help. If you guys have any questions or concerns, stuff them in the comments down below. Hope this video was informative to you all. And yep, I will talk to y'all later. Thank you guys for watching.